Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Low-Code Campfire for Friday, October 13th. I have to emphasize that it's Friday the 13th. And we're glad to have you here. Low-Code Campfire is our call where users of Plant and App gather to share ideas with each other and get help from each other. So we'll move along here. Please feel free to share anything you want to ideas that you have to share with everyone else, or if you need help with something, feel free to jump in and ask for help. This is a great gathering of people where we really like to share and help everyone. All of these meetings are recorded and we post them to YouTube on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/plantandapp. You can subscribe either by scanning this QR code or by going to our channel and subscribing. And we post a table of contents for every single meeting so that you can easily find the things that you want to go back and review in the meetings. Our agenda is pretty simple. We will start with some introductions, and then we'll go around the campfire, have a first call. Anybody who wants to jump in, and sometimes first call takes us almost to the end of the call. So we'll see how that goes today. We might check to see if there's any new contributions to the campfire website, look at our community feature requests, any submitted topics, and of course, we have our dark corners and ghost stories, campfire appropriate and Friday the 13th appropriate. That's where you talk about things that are hidden in the corners in Plant and App that you had experience with over the past week. And then at the end, we'll stop the recording, adjourn the call, and anyone who wants to stick around will have a less formal gathering without recording. So please jump in, and if you want to jump in, you just unmute yourself, or you can use the chat window to ask questions. Okay, and then our simple guidelines: if you have a lot of noise, or if you're not talking at the moment, mute yourself, and be courteous to each other. And you can submit questions and topics ahead of time by scanning this QR code. And from there, we'll jump into introductions and hello. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Friday the 13th.
Yes.
Hello.
How's everybody doing this morning? Good?
Very good.
Excellent. All right. Well, we will move right along into first call and see if anybody has something they want to jump in with.
A big shout out to your guys. We started our day really early this morning.
Yeah.
Because I know that you guys have meetings in the afternoon. And Christie, one of your developer/support, I'm not positive exactly where he is in the organization, but he's certainly knowledgeable. And we had a problem with installing on top of an old action form site where there was too sexy product on the site as well. We removed it, and we thought that maybe they were leaving remnants along, and it turned out this morning that we finally got on the your licensing expert jumped on the call with us, and we spotted the problem in the web config and solved it by learning that there's somebody else out there that was kind of throwing a rather generic catch-all kind of statement in the web config that nobody realized was there and had us going for quite a long time.
Yeah, that was that was a vendor I hadn't heard of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I guess it's, if a lot of people would like it when you log in to have the option of logging in with your Google account or your Facebook account, so that kind of a thing. And apparently there's an authentication add-on that we put on there that
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for the shout out. Christie is great, and he is on the development team, but he also is our go-to person for really digging deep into some of these problems and getting to the bottom of it. So I appreciate the shout out, and I have to say I myself appreciate Christie because I go to Christie also. So yeah.
Yeah, very, very lucky. And he's solved a couple of problems in the past. We had weird configuration problem with a very large site and couldn't upgrade it, couldn't keep upgrading it, and he solved that one as well. And sat basically dug through it. You get on Zoom and then you you basically turn it over to him, the controls, and he just goes to town and gets it figured out. So really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks. Anybody else?
A lot of crickets at the campfire tonight. I do have another thing, and
Sure.
the last, I don't know, few meetings, I've been talking about a system where I wanted to print out a bunch of PDFs and some great suggestions from the guys here. Mostly Ben had the idea of throwing it all into one big PDF rather than generating a ton of little PDFs. And finally got that all done and working. It was it was a little tricky to figure it all out, but I did figure it all out, and mostly it was just too many other interruptions to get it done in a short time. But once I had the amount of time to do it, I was able to kick out pretty quickly. And somebody, and I'm not positive who was that originally suggested it, but to have two workflows, one which is the top level workflow that decides that, yeah, you need to do this, and that start up a loop, and then another workflow which is creating one single PDF, basically the HTML that would be put into a PDF, generate that, and then do a loop, accumulate those pages. I did it that way, and it works great.
Awesome. That's great. Well, I'm excited to hear that. It sounds like that was a big project, and I'm sure it's nice to have it accomplished.
I have submitted, not specifically, but it's going to be one of the examples. And for DNN Summit, I'm still waiting on them to evaluate. I'm not sure where they are in evaluating the speakers, but one of my topics that I've submitted for speaking at DNN Summit in February is pushing clients into modern data management. And this concept of some clients, large corporations, definitely government, where they love their PDFs and they love to print things out, and they have a website that will collect the information, but they don't realize that website can also put it in into the system that they need it to go into. And so they still have the kind of archaic thought of, I need to print this out, I need to hand it to somebody who's a data entry operator, and then type all that information back into another system, instead of having the end user put it in directly. And so I've got a topic where I show a couple of different examples, and this was one of them. We'll see.
One of the things for this whole idea of looping through data to create a document, something that I worked with recently with another client on was and I know that Don, you can appreciate the extra complexity this adds because you've just been through what you've been through. But looping through records to create name tags for an event, and making sure that they fit on a standard sheet where you're going to print out 6 name tags on one sheet, and you have to loop through the records and get the 6 name tags for the first sheet and then the 6 name tags for the next sheet. So I'm sure you can appreciate the extra level of complexity you have, because you're actually taking you have to divide the records into groups of 6 and then loop through them for the one sheet, and then start the whole process over for the next one.
Exactly. Yeah, I can imagine that. And then, of course, knowing the exact positioning on a PDF so that the printout lines up correctly with the fields on your my name is sheet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else have more thoughts about that, or something else that you want to dive into?
Just comment that it's been nice to follow along with the progress that Don's been having with his project, and all the help he's been getting. It's very educational, just riding along.
A big plug for the campfire, because having folks that can where we can share ideas. I've received much more than I've given. I've tried to give where I can, but I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, if anybody else doesn't have anything, I have something once again that we can discuss. It's something it's similar to what I brought to you last week. It's something that I just want to share, and then maybe gather ideas from people. So we can take a look at that if nobody else wants to jump in with anything else.
I did have one question, because it's so
Sure.
closely related to what we've just been talking about, and that is the code exchange. To be able to have some kind of a loop. The thing you just talked about making name tags is such a universal need. Everyone, to be able to say, what, you can do that on your website would be a big boon to all of us, and to keep pushing an app out there. So to be able to say, oh yeah, there's Patrick created this, and it's over on the exchange or on the marketplace or whatever that is.
It was more a collaborative effort. I didn't create it, but I could probably and as we discussed last week, there's a time commitment when you go to put something into the Campfire website, but I think I could probably harvest what we collaboratively came up with and do that. Yeah, I think I totally agree. That would be something that would be of value to a lot of people.
It would be certainly, and to us to be to be able to get it and share it and stuff, because we're all here sharing it. But just the next step of that, which is the folks that don't come here, don't go looking in the contributions, and instead would like to just buy a module.
Yes, the marketplace. Yeah, okay, you're referring to the marketplace. Yeah, and I think that we might have talked about that briefly last week, but it's in a bit of a hold pattern right now, but and not forgotten by any means.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see here. Let me switch over to where did I want to go? So I wanted to talk about different ideas for auditing data changes in your apps, and it's something that's fresh on our mind, on my mind. I have a client that's really diving deep into this, and I have another client that came to a conclusion about how they wanted to manage their auditing of data changes. For them and for this client that's asking now, the stakeholders are saying, we want every change that's done in the system to be we want to have a history of that. And I think that everyone on this call can appreciate that is an insane amount of data to be keeping when you have a very active system for every single change for you to have a history of all of that. And what the client that's already gotten to a good place with this, basically the argument was made to the stakeholders that let's look at what we actually go back and review, what we actually have historically said, okay, we're going to go back and look at what was changed for these things, and then let's focus on that. And this is a solution that we came up with together, and I wanted to share it with you. So actually, I'm on the wrong page. I want to share first. I want to go to here first, I think. Entities, and I'll open this one. So the solution that we came up with was we created a generic table that can capture changes at a field level for any entity. And so what we're doing here is these are the properties of the audit table. So we have an action taken. We have the name of the field that was changed. We're capturing the user that made the change. We're capturing the date. We have an open field for anything else that doesn't fit into any of these other properties. So we added that in just in case. We have the previous value, the value that existed before the change was made, the new value, and the name of the entity where this was. And interestingly enough, this isn't here, but it needs to be, because this is what's on the actual system where this is implemented. We're capturing the record ID from the entities also. And I'm not sure why I didn't have that property here, but we're going to put that here real quick and save this. So we have all that, and then where I started out with here is in automation. I have this set up for one entity so far. So I have this automation job here called contact audit. And if I edit this job, you can see that that I'm using the trigger of type database update column, and telling it the table that I'm monitoring, and then I'm monitoring specific columns in the entity. So not all of the columns, but specific ones, and I can add to this or remove this, depending on what I want to audit. And then for each one of those, I have an action in here that creates a new auditing history. So for first name, we'll just take a look at one of these because they're all exactly the same. So for the first name, the action taken is that a record was updated. The name of the field is first name, so that's hard coded into the action because we're looking at the first name column. That's why we have to do one for each column. And then we're capturing the last modified by, which is that of course is one of the properties of the table that we're monitoring. So all we have to do is just use that token right there to capture that. And the last modified date is the same thing. And then I'm sure everybody on this call is, but just in case anybody's not aware, when you use a database trigger, you have access to a special token called before. And so for each of these columns, I can say what was the value before the change happened, and it will record that. So here I have the previous value as first name : before, and then the changed value is just the field token, so first name. The entity name is hard coded as contact because I have a separate automation for each entity that I'm going to monitor. So this is the contact entity. And then I didn't refresh this, so I don't have my new property here, but I should have a record ID here. And for that, I would just put in I'm not going to save this like that, but it would be ID just like that. So I have that same thing for each of the properties that I'm going to monitor. And so then when a change happens, I get an update into the audit table. So let me refresh this. I think that did one earlier. Let's make sure it came in here. Yes, so here we go on 10/13. A change happened, and so for the first name, the previous value was Mickey, changed value was Mickey. That's actually, there's something wrong there. That's not actually supposed to be how this works. But anyway, the last name was changed from Teslas to Mouse, and then the last login date was changed. So that's at a basic level, that's the solution that they used. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you and then open it up for discussion. Does anybody have thoughts on this method or other ideas about how you are doing auditing in your systems? And does anybody else have something similar to this? Implemented?
No, not down at the field level.
What is it, when you say not down at the field level, what is it that you're doing?
There are some tables that I'll monitor a record change, and I record the entire change to the record. So yeah, and I'm not recording what the value was either. I'm just recording what the new value has become and the user made it so. So I don't have much of a comment on what you're doing. I'm watching and learning, but it looks like you're creating a lot of data. I guess a lot of transactions for each transaction.
Yeah, interestingly, so I just resurrected this from a while back this morning. I haven't really been using this. This is something that was created quite a while ago, and when I first created it, it was not doing this. It actually, you know what? So this was a prototype or a POC, I guess you could say, and then the full implementation on the client system. I realize now what we did, because I think this actually, even though it's the same value, it's not changed at all. This form is submitting a value. So if it was done such that that we're not, that we actually don't submit a value to the for that column, and we do a partial update, then I think maybe this would be saved. But what we did, and I just realized on the actual system, is we added a condition. So we have a condition here that says that basically says first name before does not equal first name. So that's the piece that I'm missing here. That's actually implemented on the client system. So I think everybody
that looks
gets
like a good idea.
Yeah. So if I go in here and I put a condition and say first name, and then first name before, and save it, then now I'm only going to get a new record created if there is actually a change there, and that's what we did on the actual live system where this is happening. It looks like a lot to implement, and I think that when I with the client that I'm working with currently, where they, they're trying to determine how they're going to audit data, and they ultimately they want this kind of data, but they weren't sure if it was really practical. But I shared this with them, and I think that probably some of you were thinking, wow, this looks like a lot to implement. And initially, it probably would be, especially if you have a system with a lot of mini apps within it and a lot of entities. But if you think about it in terms of your setup and your rolling, and you add a new entity and you decide that's an entity that you want to audit, it really wouldn't be that bad. You could clone the job of another entity, and it's really going through and probably the hardest part would be determining the column names that you want to monitor. And then once you've done that, you create your first action, and then you can simply just keep on cloning them, and then it's really just a going through, and you change the you have to change the field name, the previous value, and changed value tokens, and then of course the condition. You would have to change the condition and the name of the action, just for making sure that it makes sense when you go back and look at it later. But so I think that once you get rolling, the setup would roll faster. But any other thoughts?
Have you given some thought to how you're going to present that on the screen so that a user could review the changes and maybe step back to a previous change? Or, how is that going to be presented?
Well, I think that that the way it's being used is really, I appreciate the rollback idea, and I think that in my POC, definitely I don't have that implemented. So the page here, all I can do is just look at the data here, but I can certainly see that, especially with the record ID in place, which I didn't have when we first started this call, but with the record ID in place and knowing the name of the entity, I can see the possibilities that you could say, I want to roll back this specific value right here to the previous value, and I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, roll back, and plus you'd also want to have the ability of reviewing all the changes that have been made to a particular field or record, and then names of the people who did the change next to that, so you could do a little audit on who's changing this value.
Yeah. So I think that there's an argument for a bunch of filters here, where you can filter on the person making the change, and probably not a user ID is not ideal. What you want to have here, you probably like the user ID is what you should be saving, but we should do a display here of something else that makes it more friendly. But yeah, a filter for the user making changes, so you can see what they're doing, or a filter for a record, so you can see the changes that have happened to a specific record. Yeah. And of course, this is set up for multiple entities, so you would want to be able to filter on the entity too. And you can see here's an example of when a different entity was put in here.
And then these are all good thoughts. And then another situation might be, you might be tempted to roll back to a particular data value, but that might not make sense. Or maybe you don't want to permit that in certain circumstances because data that came after that change were dependent on that data. So that could get tricky depending on the complexity of your data and the way it's interrelated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, I'm not criticizing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And this would definitely be only an admin page. You wouldn't want, just, I would think that you wouldn't want any just regular user of the system to be able to come in here and do things with this. It would be more like.
Oh, that's true, but I would include managers in that.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, like as the developer of the system, you don't want to be the only person able to do it, but you want to make sure that people who are able to see and do things with this data are pretty limited.
And are doing it right.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. But I can see that a number of situations where management would want this data. So
Mhm.
it's a valid use case. Yeah. I think it's pretty versatile that you're doing it one column at a time.
Yeah, and that's definitely what they wanted, the client that this was originally made for.
How about
I
longevity of the data? How long are you going to keep it around?
I think that's an organizational decision, right? Yeah. Because obviously it could and like just for in this scenario, the organization that's using this, their contacts table has nearly 300,000 records in it. So um, I don't think they're not changing 300,000 records on any regular basis at all. But it is this could definitely build up quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ben, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I could see the use case um for something like this. I do something similar, but not tracking to this degree on one of my applications. My only thing with this, like just because of, my type A personality, I would extend this to be more dynamic. So, like the way it's set up, it's very specific to a table and specific to fields. I would see, more of a situation where you would set it up with, the trigger for an update table, not specifically on the fields themselves, and then loop through and just pull out all the things that changed,
Mm-hmm.
and then, record it that way. And then you can loop through every single field, see everything that changes. I mean, you
So
could
you're
even put in
talking
filters later.
you're
Hmm?
talking about changes to the automation that populates this more. Is that am I
Right.
understanding you correctly? Yep.
Yeah.
Um, so here, so as
Right.
opposed to
See, like
having,
where you have all of those actions specifically for every single field,
mm-hmm,
like that would drive me absolutely batty,
mm-hmm,
because then in the future, any new entity or something that gets created, it's, even though you can clone the general
yeah,
gist
you have
of
to,
it,
mm-hmm,
it still has to be completely redone for a new
yeah,
entity. Personally, I would use SQL, and I would just basically pull out all of the field names, go through a loop, and then have that loop pull out the before and current values for every single field. And if they're different, then enter that into the log.
mm-hmm, yeah, yeah.
And
Oh, I
that
agree.
way
Yeah,
it would literally be one, automation. And the only thing that you would honestly need to add at that point, if there's a new table that you want to audit, you would add the trigger, and that's it. You don't have to do
mm-hmm,
anything else because the code actions covers every single table because it's 100% dynamic.
yeah. I agree with you. And as you know, we often tend towards the lowest code implementation for these things as possible. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's a I love the idea, and yeah, and it wouldn't be, you know uh I don't think you have to know a ton of SQL to accomplish what you're saying either. So I think that it would I love that idea.
But that does move it out of the low code environment, though.
It does, yes, right. Then it's not, at that point it's not considered a, I mean, what you're seeing right here is really a completely low code implementation. But yeah, I think that adding a little bit of coding in the form of SQL is a great idea here.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben always has great ideas.
Always.
Well, thank you.
Any other thoughts and other approaches? So Ben, you mentioned that a site where you do this. What's the scenario there? What do you actually capture, and how are you capturing it?
With that one, it's a little bit more specific to actions, as opposed to filtering down all the way granular to the field level. So I just basically have a workflow where in any situation where we're doing an import of data, an export of data, manual change to a record, anything like that, actions that are being done before the action is being done or right after, either or, I have a call to that workflow and it just passes along the information of what was done, and that's what gets stored in the audit log. So then later someone can go in and say, oh, I see that X user came in and did an import of a CSV file, and that's why the data is different, so forth, so on.
So the workflow has to be implemented on the button where the action is happening.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not being done by trigger because it has to be a little bit more dynamic than that, because sometimes, like for example, an export is not actually going to be updating any data. It's sending data out. So I can't put that on a trigger because there is no such trigger that's going to be able to record that. So being done as a workflow where you literally call the workflow and just give it the information that you want to stamp into the log, then when someone does an export, I just have it on that button saying, log the fact that an export was done on this day by this person, on this table, this many records were exported, so forth, so on. And that way, the action itself that was performed has an audit trail on it.
Are you storing that data in separate columns or as JSON or?
If I remember correctly, I believe it is a JSON string, and then I just parse out the JSON string in my the grid where they get to see the log, and it just basically kind of breaks out all of the individual values within that JSON in one column, so they can see a complete list of everything, all the details for that particular action. So that way it's more dynamic because depending on the action, it could be different details. An export action is going to have different details than an import.
Sure. Yep. And that was my guess was that you were doing something like that. That's why I asked. Cool. Anybody else have any other thoughts? Or does this possibly trigger? See what I did there? Trigger. Does this trigger anybody to into some other question? This maybe not exactly this, but related.
I guess nothing. I was thinking. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
I got nothing.
All right. I was wondering, I get the idea of doing this outside of the process, but I was seeing how I could apply it. And of course, I've been thinking a lot about this latest thing that I just created. And although it's not critical if somebody goes and changes a record, it might be a good idea to, in case records change. But I could certainly in the on the grid, when you have an edit button, that action, I can add a, write to a log or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
And have it inside of the process. Rather than having it outside and trigger it some other way, so that it's happening intentionally and part of the process.
Or I opened the grid, but of course, obviously, I'd something like that I'd put in the form in this case. But yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So when there's probably not, well, I guess if it's a new record, I probably would check that, regardless if it's a new one, or if you're updating an old one, just have the same additional piece where here's the information that's changed.
Yeah, and I agree with I guess the advantage to the automation is that So say these contacts are updated in multiple ways. There's an internal management system where we can look at stuff. Then there's where we can look at and change data for the entity. But then there's also for our users, they have a separate interface where they can look at and change data. And maybe there's some other way that data gets changed. And with the automation, we don't have to worry about making sure that we're calling the workflow or creating that record in each of those places. That's the advantage to the automation. But
Sure, that makes sense.
That's a good point.
But I definitely see Ben's argument for the broader scope where where you might have users doing things like doing an export of data, and that's a really useful piece of information to have on record to audit. Is that this person on this day exported data from our system? Who are they? How many records did they export? That's useful.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yep. And Ben has his hand up.
Yes. I was going to say there's one other way of auditing that I have actually implemented in one of my systems as well. And it's not so much a separate auditing. For the better, I hate admitting this because it makes me sound old. For the better part of 2 decades, I've had a way of doing things when it comes to creating data tables. And
Mm-hmm.
that is, and I kind of learned this, again, dating myself, from FoxPro, because FoxPro does this natively. And that is that every row has a deleted field. So you
Yep.
can actually flag a field as deleted. So it's a soft delete as opposed to a hard purge.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since I saw that many years ago, I've always implemented that manually myself in SQL. One of the things that I've done as an auditing type of thing is, and this would only work if your unique record ID is not necessarily that important. If you have something else that you can link to, some other unique field. So, as long as it's not the ID field. But for example, I have a customer that has a specific record of information and they go to make a change. What I do is I have a customer ID in addition to the ID field of the record. So the ID field is just there to make it unique, but the customer ID is how I link. So I pull out that customer's record that they're modifying. I flag it, or rather, I clone it so that it creates a new record. I flag the old one as deleted, and then I save the changes to the new record. So the
Mm-hmm.
table itself is actually, in and of itself, internally
The
keeping its
history.
own audit and its
Yep.
history, because all of the previous records are flagged as deleted, but their original data is there. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
give you some additional information too, in the sense that you get to see, depending on how you've written it, but you get to see when the record was created and who created the record, when was the last time it was modified, things like that, that you won't lose. Whereas if you're auditing in a separate table, sometimes you're not necessarily recording that record when it was originally created, who originally created the record, things like that. So you're not actually going to lose any of the data. All you're doing is saying, okay, I'm going to save a new record with this new changed information. The old record, I'm just going to flag it as deleted so that it's hidden,
Mm-hmm.
but the actual data is still there, and you can always go back into the tables and pull that history out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, it doesn't require a third auditing table, or anything like that, or additional logic. You would just have to know that, in your own logic moving forward, every time you do any type of update, save, add, whatever, you just have to add that logic into it to say, okay, whatever or more like an edit rather, not an add. But when you're
Mm-hmm.
editing an existing record, just pull that record out, clone it, delete it, and then save the new record.
Yeah. I definitely see the advantage of that. It does create an extra level of complexity that you have to think about every time, especially for some of this default functionality that we have that's closely tied to record IDs, you'd have to configure that differently every time to make sure that you're hooking to that ID that's moving forward to each of those records. But I think it's a great idea. I think that probably some of the people who are on this call are familiar with this. In the past, I think we've talked about it maybe on Campfire even, but the idea of using SQL's temporal tables. And I've configured that in some situations. That is also a log of every change that happens, where it actually records. It creates a whole new record for each time that a change happens to a table automatically in SQL. That is kind of a cool thing, but and that is actually one of the things that we looked at for this client that came up with that this is their final solution. We looked at using temporal tables, but that just creates a ton of data, and because you have a whole separate a whole separate table that duplicates everything about the main table. Have you worked with temporal tables at all, Ben?
That I have not, no.
Okay. I actually wish I had a setup of that, but I don't.
Yeah, you've brought that up before in a previous meeting or two.
Yeah, I
We
think
talked
so.
about how much data it creates.
It does. It creates a lot of data. That's the drawback to it. The cool thing is that you can have completely separate you can have a completely separate grid that will where you can query the separate temporal table for all the history. It's pretty useful, but it's the amount of data that it creates that I think is the biggest challenge.
So, question for Ben. Ben, if you're the way you just described recording your changes by flagging the deleted field, are you also recording who deleted and what date and time?
Yes. So basically, my tables have similar to what Plantain App does with its entities. I've been doing this again for the better part of 20 years. I always have 4 fields, and that's created on, created by, last modified on, last modified by. So when a field is deleted, I update the last modified by and last modified on. And the last thing you could possibly ever do to a record is delete it. So once it's deleted, I update those 2 fields. Now I know exactly who deleted the field and when, because that record is never going to be touched again after it's been flagged as deleted.
Gotcha.
And that has come in handy because I've had people say, well, I didn't delete this information. Why is it gone? And I'm like, hold on one second. I pull out my table and I'm like, actually, you did delete it on this day and at this time. And, they don't realize I'm like, yeah, I have that information tracked. So, can't pull the wool over my eyes.
Mhm.
But, the nice thing of doing something like that, too, is they could turn around and say, well, I didn't mean to delete that. Can you restore it? And then all I have to do is say, yeah, sure, not a problem. And you just do a quick update statement and make deleted equal false, and the record's back. No need to do a restore of an old database backup and find the record and, recreate it or anything like that. You just unflag it and the data's
So
back.
that's a great service that you're providing, actually. You just made it easy to roll that back. Yeah, sure, not a problem. I think in a lot of most other databases, yeah, sure, that's not a problem would not be uttered.
Oh yeah, because I've dealt with this with my clients all the time, where they're constantly saying, "Oh my God, I just deleted something by accident," or "Oh my God, whatever I did, I need that data back." And I'm like, in the past, it used to be a situation of, hold on a second, now I got to get a backup, got to restore it into a temporary database. Then I got to query that database, find the data, then figure out a way to recreate the data. Because at this point, if it's based off of ID or anything like that, it's problematic. Whereas if you're just flagging, you unflag it, that record comes back. And then, basically what I have is in some cases, some automation that just goes like once a day and it just runs through the tables and it deletes things that are, let's say, for argument's sake, a deleted record that it's over 3 months old. So at least those deleted records aren't going to get massive. I don't necessarily have that everywhere, because in some cases they're like, no, we want all the history. We don't ever want to lose. But in other cases, they're like, yeah, after 3 months, if it's a deleted record and we haven't brought it back, we don't need that data. So just to kind of keep things small, there are some tables that I go through and, like I said, any soft deleted records, I do a full purge after X many days.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I see you pulled up one of my
I did, because I knew we'd
feature
had this
requests.
discussion before. So I'm sharing this with everybody, because please feel free to go vote it up if you haven't already. And we've
Yeah,
had
you can
discussion.
click on it too. You haven't voted it up.
Have I not?
No, because there's
Oh,
there
there
you
we
go.
go.
See?
Well, see, that's how you vote something up, everybody.
And that's how you know if you voted, because it has that little
Yep,
icon
the
underneath.
little
That's why I
check
didn't
mark
see
there.
the
Yeah.
icon. I'm like, I know I put that in there.
Um, so and I think we've had internal discussions about this idea too. I I I don't think it's close to being implemented, but it's something that I have long felt. I've used this before myself in both working with previous implementations of various sorts, but also in Plantin app I've used this as well, just by adding a deleted property. But the difference with it being built into Plantin app as a default thing would be that the things that create the things that get created by default are deleted buttons and everything. They could actually do that process that Ben was just talking about. Just set the soft delete property, and then our data sources could be filtered to not include the deleted property, and maybe there's a proper a selection you can make to say that you want to include deleted or something like that. So I think there's with it actually being incorporated into the default entity properties, there's a lot of really great possibilities there.
And it's
So
funny you mentioned that, because that's exactly what I do. Like all of the tables, well, I mean, I have a because I try to make my life easy. I have a macro before Plantin app did entities and whatnot. We had to create our own tables. So I actually have a macro where it writes out and creates the structure of a table where I add my fields. And when I'm done with that, I run another macro. It reads that information and then builds out stored procedures specific to that table structure. That gives me an add, it gives me a delete, it gives me multiple functions for pulling out a specific record or pulling out a list of records, like all the records. And those functions accept a parameter of show deleted. So
cool.
if I do select star from whatever my function is and give it the parameter of show deleted as false, then by default, it's just going to pull out all of the active records. Now, if I want to look at history, things that were deleted, I say show deleted set to true, and then it won't filter out those deleted records. So that way, if there's something that I need to have an administrative grid where it shows all the records that were deleted so that you can click on a restore button to unflag it, all I have to do is set that flag differently, and that function will return all the records without filtering out the soft deleted ones. But yes, I that's exactly what I have done in the past, just to make life easy. And I could see that being incorporated, into Plantin app, where on a delete, have a little checkbox, like the default behavior be a soft delete, but then have a checkbox that says, for example, hard delete. So if you check that, then you're basically saying, I don't want the soft delete, just literally purge the record. And then on a read all, it by default will filter out soft deleted records, but you can have a check that say include soft deleted records.
Yep. Absolutely. Does anybody else use the soft deleted in their work?
Not yet.
What'd you say, Mark?
Not yet, but there's a yet involved with that.
I was about
really?
to say, he said yet, so I'm like, it sounds like he's interested in this idea.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's it's important. I really appreciate the soft delete. It's saved me in a lot of situations in the past. And then also exactly what Ben was saying, it's a great service to your end users as well to say to them, well, yeah, you deleted something, but it's not necessarily gone. Cool. Anybody else have any more thoughts about audits? I think this is, I'm glad we're having this discussion. This is really great. Any more thoughts about audits? It seems somewhat appropriate that our discussion on auditing data and the idea of being able to restore data is happening on Friday the 13th.
So yeah, I do have an additional thought. I had some training in accounting at a previous life, and I'm just thinking about the audit trail of doing what we've been talking about today, and just that the way one of these methods that we've been talking about really does a good job of providing an audit trail that the user has influenced. However, it ignores the ability of one of us to go in there and change the data directly. But Patrick, the method you started with still captures what the administrator may have changed in the background. So as far as like a true auditing would go, I think the one with the automation would be more complete, in terms of that. But, we don't always need to have complete accounting audits. And so there's a place for both.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess, it, the truest form of auditing would be something like Ben was talking about, where he's recreating the records for each edit, or the temporal table option that I was talking about. Yeah, because that actually is really capturing every single thing that happens and keeping a record of that. But then you just have huge amounts of data to and you have to come up with a purging plan. Then there's no question about that.
Good discussion.
Yeah. Well, I think that we pulled this through to the end here, so that's kind of cool. So I think that we'll move towards wrapping this up. I really thank you guys for this great discussion. I'm glad we had it, and I look forward to seeing you again next Friday. And your regular host should be back, all refreshed from his great vacation at that point. And until then, happy low coding. Stick around if you can for the afterglow.
Have a nice weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Bye now.